What up? Got the electric out here, and I'm going to share some tips about kind of how I practice. And one of the biggest things, actually the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is that I think where you can make the most gains in your practice is just how you get more out of the time you spend practicing, especially during like your warm up. This is where I see most string players and a lot of musicians in general just wasting a lot of their time. And the reason is because as classical players, we always have these like classical warm-ups and exercises for technique, but that time is kind of wasted because you shouldn't just be working on technique. You could be working on technique and rhythm and harmony and improvisation. So that's the big idea I want you to take from this, is how can you consolidate your practice time so that you're working on not only technique, but also rhythm, harmony, and improvisation. That's the biggest thing I want you to take from this. I don't care if you like what I'm doing otherwise, but this will help you get better faster. And yeah, so let me just get into it. So I'm gonna this is kind of when I start practicing, basically I don't just think let me do a warm-up, because that warm-up is going to waste time. So I try to get right into how can I warm up on something that also not only is warming up my technique, but helping me work on rhythm, harmony, and improvisation. So I'm going to set up a loop to do that. Let's see if I can get that going. We'll see how that is. It's okay. So basically, I'm setting up a loop that kind of already challenges me rhythmically just to get the loop set up. I kind of got lucky that it's as good as it is on that first try. I usually might take a couple tries, especially if it's a new loop, like something I'm just trying to create, you know. I'll set up a little harmony for it. It's just basically two chords, G minor 7 to B minor 7. I'll see if I can set up like a little so that's just the loop. So already I'm working on rhythm and I'm working on just creating something from the very beginning of my practice, right? I'm not wasting the first 20 minutes just to warm up my left hand and my right hand. I'm already like trying to be creative and thinking about musical things like rhythm. And so then when I start practicing, when I start actually blowing or improvising over this, there's all kinds of things, like ways I can approach it. But if I haven't touched my instrument, I'm gonna, I can just warm up. So if it's like, if all you do is long tones for your warm-up, then do long tones over this, but while you're also thinking about the harmony and while you're thinking about improvisation. Now for the harmonic side specifically of this, I have a new bundle that I'm offering. I'm giving, basically, you can get my scale resource, and there's a whole free video that goes with that. I'll link to that. You can get my scale resource, and you'll also get a free tonal improvisation course with it. So if you want more on the harmonic side, it's fine. But for this right now, I'm going between these two key signatures, basically a G minor 7 to a B minor 7. So that requires a little bit of harmonic navigation. Like ultimately, you want to be able to really, you want to be able to sort of navigate those key signatures really fluently. But let's say we're warming up and we just want to think about intonation. If I'm just working on getting intonation, getting flow in the left hand, but also working on getting flow in the right arm. So in the bowing videos I've talked about recently, I've talked a lot about how I'll improvise my bow, but try to keep the sound steady. So I can give you an example of that. So in this example, the point is not for me to be play something genius. It's just for me to work on the bow. So. So just like focusing on the smoothness of my bow, and it doesn't have to be fast like that. It could be slower, but also focusing on my intonation, focusing on like I could be focusing on like my shoulders, which I don't have my shoulder rest, which is probably why you'll notice me clutching a lot right now. But and the reason part of the reason I'm using my electric right now is because I just want you to be able to hear I don't want you to hear the acoustic like bleeding in against that one. So anyway, this is all about how you make more from the moment you pick up your instrument, that your practice serves you because you're working on multiple things at once. That first 20 minutes that you spend on your warm-up and all you're doing is warming up your fingers or like looking at old shifts and old exercises out of Galamian and Flesh or whatever, you're wasting so much energy and time just focusing on those tiny, minute things when you could be working on like 5 other things at the same time. That's the point of this. Now, once I get into it, I can improvise over this progression, and I can score myself in terms of my rhythmic consistency, and it also score myself in terms of whatever other values that I have in place for myself, whatever that might be. Like, do I repeat myself? Do I play the same licks or not? Those are scoring systems. Are my phrasing, does my phrasing have variety? Is there something compelling about the direction of every melody? Is every note in the groove? So those are the kinds of things I'm going to start to think about, and I'll record myself. And ideally, I'll record myself in a way that I can then use that and to market myself as well. It's all the same idea. It's consolidation. So I'll just get into a little improvisation around this. And then, by the way, there's a difference. If I'm performing on stage, I might take an improvisation on here slightly differently than in the practice room. And this is sort of a little of both, because I'm showing you what I'm like in the practice room, but I'm kind of performing for you. So. Now, that was sort of a free-form improvisation, I guess is what that became. Sort of, I treated that more like, what would I do if I was on stage right now and I had my, my 40 seconds of blowing, But what I could do, obviously, is I could give myself restrictions and parameters and sort of make a game out of it in a lot of different ways, technically, rhythmically, and harmonically, right? Those are the important factors. So if it's like, let's say, technically, let's say that I want to work on like a separate détaché. Well, I could try to play just like a détaché solo and just like treat it as a chance to work on this. Now, it's going to affect my rhythm, and it might even affect the quality of the lines I play. But let's just say that that's what I want to work on. I want to work on like double stops. Or string crossings. I don't know what I'm going to do for string crossings. Okay, I'm going to try that Bach partita thing. That's hard. Could be whatever. Let's see here. Let's see if anybody has any questions about this. Oh, that's a good question, Aaron, how to set up a loop like that. So everybody, well, the biggest thing I would say about how to set up a loop is that the problem most people have is that they ask about the technology. The technology is pretty easy and anybody can learn it with the manual online. All there is a button that you press with a loop. It's really an issue of writing, and so that's how I would answer your question. Is like, how do you learn to write a loop, and then it's like performing it so that it feels good enough. But for loops, basically, I would say like start with like drone, then just add some pulse to a drone, and then add like some kind of bass line to that pulse, and then maybe add a chord progression to that pulse. So this is a pretty simple chord progression, you know, or a pretty simple groove. It's based on this. It's like 2 bars of G minor and 2 bars of B minor. And you can take snippets of songs that you hear out there and you can steal either their groove or steal their chord progression. Right? So if you hear a song, you're like, I just like the way those 2 bars move or those 4 bars move. Then you can take that chord progression, but it doesn't have to be the same groove that they use. You could find a groove from somewhere else and be like, I like that groove. Let me marry this chord progression to that groove. Let's see if there's any other questions. Man, I got people on here like Bill Patterson. Good to see you, Bill. And Zedric. I never know who's going to be on here. I figure it's going to be like, you know, string players and stuff. But then it's just like real hip humans, you know. Yeah. Well, Aaron, as far as the length of the loop, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's going to be easier for you to work on your rhythm and your pocket with a shorter groove, obviously, like a shorter loop, like 1 bar is a start, you know, or 2 bars. And then once you feel more comfortable about your knowledge of that material, that smaller amount of material is always going to be good to work on. Now, this is a small amount of material for me too, right? But a lot of times I'll take a whole tune and I'll set up a loop, but that can be boring for the audience too, and you know, so I didn't want to bore you guys with like a super long loop. So yeah, that's really my point. The thing I wanted to show today, and the theme that I'm trying to show in many ways, is how you consolidate and make the most of the time you have when you practice. And the mistake that I see classical musicians make is that the biggest problem they have, the biggest objection they have about learning other skills outside of classical music or learning other genres outside of classical music is that they say, well, I only have so much time to practice and I've already got 2 hours scheduled for my exercises and my etudes or I'm sorry, my scale warm-ups and my repertoire. So my whole point is basically that warm-up, that 20 minutes that you spend on scales and even etudes, because a lot of times etudes are meant to help you address a technical issue. Whatever etude you're working on, you're actually working on some technical issue on the right hand or left hand. So my point is, make your own etudes. Definitely don't spend that first half hour when you're practicing, you know, and just basically you're throwing it away when you're just doing a warm-up. I recognize that like it feels good to do that warm-up and like it does have some benefits, but my point is you'll have so many more benefits when you include working on rhythm, working on harmony, and working on improvisation or composition along with that technical practice. It's just intelligent practice. That's all it is. This is not a jazz thing. You know, although I think a lot of musicians intuitively, like my friend Hamilton Hardin, people who weren't trained classically, they do employ a lot of these intelligent practice techniques. Some jazz musicians do, some people that play other styles of music. So I'm trying to kind of reverse engineer that. I think that it's about the insecurity and the fear that we have, which is why we go back to what we know, which is like, let me just do this Galamian exercise. Let me do this scale thing because that's what I know how to do. I feel like you got to kind of think for yourself and you got to take chances. And even it feels like I think even we feel afraid to take chances in front of ourselves, let alone in front of a live audience, right? It's like we don't even want to like try something on the loop pedal in front of ourselves because we're so afraid, you know, of where it's going to go. And I get that, but I mean, if you want to be pushing, if you want to be growing as a musician, I think we have to look at those deeper things. We have to look at why are we scared, or how is our fear holding us back from actually doing what's going to make us better. And the same thing I think is probably true in, you know, how you make money, how you interact in other aspects of your life. So I'll see if there's any other questions here. Then I'll probably I'll do a little more playing, and then I'll probably sign off here. So let's see see what I can do on this loop here. A little get a distortion going here. I don't know about that distortion. Yeah, let's try it. Just fun. I don't like that. It's too fuzzy. That was very cliche. Anyway, okay, I got a little carried away there. So, yeah, that's my tips for today on this Facebook live stream. Like I said, I've got a new, basically like a bundle that I'm offering right now. It's a special bundle, so you can get my jazz scales resource. That resource is a printed PDF of basically all the scale exercises you can do on violin, viola, or cello. I've got it in all the different clefs, but I've got a forward and I've got sort of a whole explanation, and it's very related to what I showed you now, but it's more like the foundation for the harmonic side of that. And I've got it. I'm going to link to it. I'll get off here and I'll link to it. just go to my website. You can, or if you just look for Christian Howe's jazz scales, you'll find it. But it's not really about jazz. It's about intelligent practice for any kind of player. And so anyway, right now I've got it on sale. And when you buy that, you also will get a free total other course, which is called Easy Tonal Improvisation, which is a game changer. So that's all on the harmonic side. But if you guys don't know, anybody that's here, or anybody that's watching on the replay, we also have our workshops coming up. Be in New York City in a couple weeks, then I'll be in Europe. And then we've got Toronto, Australia. Looks like we're trying to do Malaysia and Thailand as well. And then we'll be for our big annual festival in Columbus, Ohio, and our annual intimate retreat in Asheville. So definitely, if you're a string player, really you should come to these retreats. They're just awesome hangs. It's a great chance for us to connect, not only me and you, but with a great community. If you're not already in the Creative String Players Facebook free community, make sure to join that. Thanks for checking out, guys. Take care.